Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday's February edition of the Agile Roundabout. And yeah, I'd just like to thank you all firstly for joining us this month, and we're so pleased to have you a part of our Agile community. So this month we're going to be focusing around the topic of OKRs, and I hope you'll agree with two amazing speakers who I hope will be able to help us navigate through this particular topic. So to introduce them, so first we'll be hearing from Matt Hosking, who's from Harbour Technology. He's an enterprise agile coach there. And then we'll be hearing from Rob Cooper, who's the lead agile coach at Sainsbury's. So for all of you who are new to this Agile Roundabout community, my name's Jonathan and I host and run the events here. TRG, the company I work for, started these meetups back in 2016 as a way of giving back to the tech community. And I hope that all our members still continue to benefit from the talks and discussions that arise from these talks. So back to this evening, both speakers would love your participation and interaction. So any questions that you have, please feel free to ask via the comment section. And just to note that you'll have to sign into Google to do this as we're streaming through YouTube. And finally, any social media, please use the hashtag Agile Roundabout. And if you're interested in continuing the discussion on this particular topic or any other Agile related topic, then please join our Slack community. My colleague Beth will post in the link in the comments section. So right, without further ado, Matt's going to talk us through OKRs within SAFe. So I'll pass over the baton to you, Matt.
Thank you very much. Okay, right, well, I think a good place to start will potentially be in the black. evening. Right. Good evening, everybody. What you witnessed just then was, unfortunately without sound, the landing of the Perseverance rover on Mars, which happened a week ago today. The reason I play that clip, it might seem a slightly odd place to start with regards to a conversation about OKRs, but actually there's some useful constructs that we can take from, well, not just the Perseverance mission, but actually from the space endeavours in the round when we look at OKRs. So something which NASA and others are really hot on is having a mission. And here is the mission for Perseverance. And she's going to go and study Mars' habitability, seek signs of past microbial life, collect and store samples of selected rock and soil, and prepare for future human missions. This is a nice, punchy, quick, catchy goal statement that makes quite a lot of sense. Following on from the mission, though, they've got something else. They've got a vision. Now, I'm not going to read this whole vision to you because you can probably see this and read it yourself. But actually what this vision is doing is effectively starting to paint a much more thorough picture about what they are really hoping to achieve, and in parts about how they might do it. So actually they make references to testing the Martian atmosphere in here, and they talk about potentially using innovations that they've already demonstrated in previous missions, but then also describe some things that they might do for the first time, including core sample drilling of the Martian planet. So having got that mission and the vision, they then have some other constructs as well. What they have is 4 objectives. One relating to geology, one relating to astrobiology, one for sample caching, and one for preparation for humans. And if we start looking into those, they start to follow a fairly standard form. Actually, here we have a statement of the objective. We're going to study the rocks and the landscape at the landing site to reveal the region's history. And then underneath that, we have a couple of bullets which describe how the objective is going to be measured or met. Actually, we're going to study the area to understand its historical climate and environment and study its geologic diversity. So we look through the other objectives into objective B. Here's one relating to looking to see if the area is suitable for life and look for signs of ancient life itself. And again, we'll see there are some criteria for meeting that objective written underneath it, just the 3, including observations regarding habitability and preservation as a guide, anything about studying for biosignatures, that kind of thing. And as we step through again, here's the objective C on sampling. So cache samples for possible future return to Earth. And again, here's 3 criteria for meeting the objective. I'll just pick up the last one there. Actually, this one actually has some statistic in it. It says Perseverance has got 38 empty tubes in which it can store samples, and it's looking to collect, well, hopefully 30 of them as it progresses its mission. And last but not least, here's number 4, objective D, preparing for humans. And again, here we have some criteria. We're going to take surface weather measurements. We're going to characterize the dust particles in the atmosphere. We're going to see if actually we can produce oxygen from the Martian atmosphere, and we'll gather data on aerothermal conditions and a range of other elements. So there's a pattern here, as I say, which seems fairly well structured. At the top, we have that mission statement, sometimes called a goal, but either way, that short, punchy direction of what it is we are trying to do. And then we have the vision, which paints that picture in more detail, adds color, potentially adds context, adds a little bit of method. And then underneath that, we had that set of objectives, the 4 of them, which effectively are looking to deliver that vision. And then below that, we have what actually are key results. If you like, those are the measures that we say, actually, if we do these particular things, we will have met that objective. So if we look at this from an enterprise and an enterprise strategy perspective, actually, we tend to do other things in organizations as well. It's all very well having key results, but we tend to need initiatives or epic initiatives or arrange projects, programs, but we need to go and do things to deliver against the key results, because the key result effectively is a measure and we need to deliver against that measure. So here, this is where enterprise strategy lives, actually. Obviously, the mission is what we want to achieve. It's the goal, but actually strategy itself is not the goal. Strategy is how we achieve the goal. And strategy is a very broad-reaching view, effectively. It comes from the Greek of strategos, meaning effectively the view of the general. The general surveying a battlefield ultimately has quite a broad view of what's going on. There'll be skirmishes and bits and pieces going in here and there, and there'll be gains and losses, but they have that overarching holistic strategic view of what is going on the field. And in this instance, in the enterprise space, really our vision is giving us that high level description, and our objectives and those key results are framing up the strategic things that we need to do to be able to achieve the mission. Now, there's some other phrases that go with this. I'll just bring up this one, which is tactics, because some people see an objective or a key result and say, well, that's the strategy. And it isn't actually. If you take any of those individually or in smaller subsets, they aren't actually any longer the strategy. They're simply pieces of the strategy and what you might consider to be tactics. And indeed, individual initiatives delivering against an individual key result, again, perfectly worthy things to do, but this effectively is a tactic in the overall strategy. So putting this into what we tend to call OKRs, the objective itself, this is a qualitative description of what we'd like to achieve. It's usually trying to describe a potential future state. It is a differentiating business objective, something that will make things different than they are today. And from the key result perspective, normally there are 2 to 5 quantitative measures that we can capture to see if we have indeed achieved the objective or how we are progressing towards it. I've put a small example at the bottom here. Now, if we want to give our customers the best shopping experience in our sector, let's assume they don't have it today, then actually some of the measures, some of those key results I might look at include improving our Trustpilot score, maybe improving our Net Promoter Score, increasing our repurchase rate, or maybe reducing our call center queue times. And you'll notice in each of these instances, there is a measure, there is a number. If there's no number, it's not a key result. We need to know where we are going, what the target is, so we can determine whether we met it or not. So what happens at the enterprise level, at the strategy level is, well, firstly, you don't want too many of these things, but actually you should end up with maybe 5, 6, up to 7 really key objectives, which are describing that potential direction, potential future state of the enterprise, and then a set of key results underneath each of those, which effectively are the measures of progress and indeed the acceptance criteria, if you like, for whether the objective itself has been met. So an organization, as I say, operating at this kind of scale, classically, you're going to end up with maybe 20 up to maybe 30 real core metrics that you can track inside your organization to, if you like, plot its path towards achieving that mission. So having sort of touched on what objectives are, now let's just drift into how SAFE works with them. So here is the SAFE big picture, and the box that I've just put a square around effectively is the corner that looks and deals mostly with OKRs. And you might not know they're there, but they actually are. Because in the top corner, we've got the enterprise. There it is. And there's that enterprise strategy that I just described. You can use that mission and that vision metaphor effectively to start describing that enterprise vision. And then SAFE has something called strategic themes, and SAFE describes them as describing the future state of a portfolio, connecting the portfolio to the enterprise strategy, and providing context for the vision and lean budgets. Now, these are OKRs, actually. Whilst they're called something else, nominally the OKR structure works perfectly here in the SAFE framework to drive the portfolio. And when I say portfolio, in a small to medium-sized enterprise, the organization might only have one portfolio. It might be everything that the organization wants to do. In a very large organization with multiple P&L, it might be it has a few portfolios, in which case it would take particulars of the strategic themes or particular OKRs to drive that particular portfolio. But what we use these OKRs, labeled strategic themes, to do is ultimately help us come up with a portfolio vision. Help us think about what might go on our Kanban and in our portfolio backlog. Help provide vision for lower levels in the model, actually. So at solution and program level, provide that future thinking view of the world, and also help us in budgeting and also in our budget guardrails. Now, SAFE uses something which is the portfolio canvas. This is actually taken from the lean business model canvas that was created many years ago. It's tweaked it a little bit, but it uses this as a modeling tool that we can apply those OKR aspirations to. And the way SAFE does that is it says, you know what, over here on the left-hand side, why don't we think about a current state for our portfolio? We can use that canvas to model where we are today. But then we use those OKRs, those strategic themes, as inputs to help us model potential future states of where we might find ourselves. And we might take different dimensions, maybe in our customer space or an operations space, to take different modeling approaches. But ultimately, we take a wide range of divergent thinking and use those OKRs as that direct input, because really they are the descriptor of the potential future state we're seeking. And then we'll use some convergent thinking to come up with our favored future state portfolio canvas. And from that, having created that canvas and thinking about the descriptive elements on it, we can then start describing those epic initiatives that we might need to put in place to deliver that potential future state. Now, something that SAFE does when we start talking about initiatives and things like that is it doesn't have projects. SAFE has a concept of value streams. And in the budgeting sense in SAFE, we have a portfolio budget. As I said, that might be a whole company budget if it's not a very large company. But ultimately, it is going to fund a set of what we call value streams. In this case, development value streams that are delivering potential solutions, which should be contributing towards those goals set inside those key results of the objectives above. The joy of funding value streams rather than projects is we have much better flow. We've removed a lot of non-value add activity in finding funding, finding resource, writing reports, doing a whole manner of other projects related items, and we can get on with delivering value into our customer space. So talking more into the budgeting space and how SAFE thinks about this, SAFE uses the McKinsey 3-horizon model, a slight modification on it, and it says what we should do is, cognizant of the potential future state, we should look at those epic initiatives we're considering, and we should map them into the different areas on the McKinsey model. So ultimately, we should be looking out in Horizon 3 at potentially emerging opportunities, but then in Horizon 2, look at things that might be becoming into our Horizon 1 area in the near future. And then in Horizon 1, we're earning most of our money today. We should be putting significant amounts of our investments. It's worth noting that those concepts I call value streams may not match that model themselves exactly, but across any one particular portfolio, we should be able to see that particular construct. Now, I know I've mentioned value streams a couple of times, so I'll just explain how these work in the SAFE context. So here's a quick sample example. This is an operational value stream for a loan. Actually, at the start, I have the need for a loan from a customer. At the far end, I've got the loan being repaid with interest. And just for a very simplified explanation, let's just imagine that there are two systems just to supporting that value stream. I've got solution A dealing with the customer attraction and eligibility and all those good things. And then I've got solution B, which is looking at extending the loan terms, awarding the loan, and then dealing with the repayments. Underneath those two, I've effectively got two, what we call the development value streams. These are two streams of activity which are looking at enhancing the feature sets in those solutions to meet the needs of the operational value stream. And ultimately, these are the things that we are looking at funding when we talk about SAFE and lean budgeting and how we might move to this potential future state. So in this little picture at the bottom, I've got a couple of value streams there drawn with the chevrons. One of them has got one agile release train in it, again a safe construct, and the other has got two. But ultimately, those value streams at a development level are there to support the operational level. So where does that take us? Ultimately, having explained what value streams are and briefly sort of how they work, from a budgeting perspective and where we really use these strategic themes is here. So these strategic themes, let's say these are OKRs, we will use them to look at those potential future portfolio epics and also evaluate epics that may already be inside our existing roadmap. And SAFE uses a construct called participatory budgeting, where nominally we'll take our portfolio budget, which may already been split into a set of value streams. If we are mid-flight, they may not yet have been formed, but we will use those OKRs to inform how we wish to fund going forwards. We'll have a portfolio roadmap where we may have mapped them onto it based on that McKinsey Horizon model, but nominally we will be driving this participatory budgeting process for a collaborative group, or maybe several groups inside an enterprise, to work out what really is important and what should get funded. And then out the right-hand side of that, effectively, we will get a new set of budgets for the enterprise, and effectively these will be driving the work that's being done. So to get into effectively that element where the work is done, when I've got an approved bunch of epic initiatives that need delivering, I'll put them into a portfolio Kanban. And again, we'll start asking ourselves questions within the Kanban. I mean, the first one is this really a portfolio epic? Is this of this right grain size? Is it pointing in the right direction? Yes. But then next, is the epic aligned with a strategic theme? Or in other words, are we aligned with delivering against our enterprise level OKRs? And by the time I've wandered through analyzing a portfolio backlog, by the time I then get to implementing, what happens is these particular epic pieces of work that have been weighed up against those organizational OKRs will finally pass to the release trains elsewhere in the model to deliver on, hopefully, those measures that we see expressed at the OKR level. So I started talking there about the top left corner of the SAFE model there. What flows on from where we just were is this box down here on the right, where we actually will do the execution. But hopefully I've given you a flavor of how the SAFE model uses that OKR concept to connect the enterprise strategy in the top left with the execution section that I've now got circled here. So best part, a quick thanks to NASA. Sadly, you didn't get the sound, but it was there and it sounded tremendous. And a quick thanks to Scaled Agile as well, as I've used some of their material. And we are open to questions.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much. So we've got one from Hamid. He says, "Do you think enterprises are ready for Agile?"
For Agile,
yeah.
Well, I think enterprises certainly are, because I mean the SAFE framework has been quite pervasive in the enterprise space for 10 years now. So I think since, well, really, I say Agile popular culture boomed in the mid-2000s, I think an awful lot of enterprises have been looking to Agile to solve what effectively is now a very disruptive and highly complex market space where consumer wants and needs are significantly more demanding than they were, say, 20 or 30 years ago.
Cool. Okay, so if there's obviously any more questions for Matt, then obviously feel free to put them in the comment section, and we'll bring you back at the end after the next talk. And obviously, if there's any more questions, then we'll definitely put them to you. But next, we're going to be hearing from Rob, who's going to be talking to us about OKRs. So Rob, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks so much. Let's see if we can get this. Sharing nicely. There we go. Okay, yeah. So, hi everybody. I'm Rob Cooper. I'm lead agile coach. I was thinking, I was introduced as the lead agile coach. There are many lead agile coaches in Sainsbury's. I am but one of them. So, so yes, it's really great to be able to talk about these, and appreciate the opportunity to chat about OKRs. I've been a coach for maybe sort of 8 or so years, and before that within the project management space. The angle that I want to give to OKRs today is a little bit more around looking at the team space. Because obviously Matt's just talked quite a bit around the sort of fairly high level, like the enterprise space and how that kind of looks at broadly, especially within SAFe, and that was really, really interesting. So I enjoyed that, but I'm going to try and bring it down. Okay, bring it down a little bit level, because I suppose I'm making an assumption about the people who are going to be potentially listening to this, joined in. You may be working in an enterprise space, in which case that's great. Maybe Matt's talk is going to really sort of have spoken to you. It might be that you're, more into sort of team space, team coach, scrum master, something like that. So maybe that's where I want to try and orient this to. As you say, there is just well, let's kind of let's press on. So I don't know. Spend too much on time on this, because obviously Matt has already talked about this, but again, just to think about at a kind of a slightly lower level, still valuable level, that when we're talking about objectives, it should be it is thinking about whether it's an enterprise that may have many particular objectives that sit within mission, vision, and so forth. It might be that there's something a little bit more tactical about objectives and key results, but it's still thinking, right, well, we're here and we want to get to some future state. That's where we want to, where are we heading? And yeah, the key results, the actual quantitative, numerical based sort of proof of the pudding. And so, yeah, that's sometimes you might see it in the format of I will or we will do such and such, and we're going to measure it. And it's one of those things where often you may see in your organization at whatever level, you might see a lot of aspirational things. We want to do this, we want to do such and such. And I think there's two kind of potential banana skins that you can think of, and we'll touch on a few more sort of potential banana skins a little bit later on. The first is that we often put these together in a way that is about doing stuff. Okay, and this is a kind of a classic agile theme, and as agilists, you'll be tackling this day by day probably. But there's a lot of inclination in organizations to deliver stuff, and you still think, oh well, if the pressure is on delivery, I want to do there, and if I release this piece of software, fantastic, tick in the box, I've done it. And that was very much my my perspective, especially when I was in a former life as a project manager. I would be very much thinking about, well, we just, you get it over the line, you do it, right, great, and then you go off onto the next piece of work. Now, if you're lucky, you might deliver some value, but you're not focusing on that. You're not focusing on how does this actually measurably help an organization or a part of organization that you're working with. And I think that's one of the things where we need to be mindful, not just with OKRs, but more generally when we're trying to figure things out. And this is when we, for example, if you're working with product owners or product people, you may well be helping them to think about value rather than delivering stuff. And they may be under pressure to deliver stuff. And so maybe as coaches, this is where we can help and support them. But then also there is that, it's sometimes it's tough. It's tough to measure value. Now, you might be able to come up with measures such as, oh yeah, well, we have an net promoter score, or we have a particular amount of users and so forth. Some of those things you can add a little bit more to hand, but a lot of the objectives, especially when we're thinking about value, when we're thinking about, okay, what measures would actually show us that, that can actually be quite tough. And that can be quite tough in terms of exposing that measurable data in order to be able to support your objective. Now, it might be so, well, and once you've figured out that data, it might be that there's an initiative to actually start to expose it or access it, or actually, you to be able to move the dial on it. So that's a kind of couple of things, and that works. I would suggest at any level. Say if you're working with a team, and say you're working with a team and a Scrum team or something, and you want to help them. They identify out of the kind of the back of a retrospective. They identify that they want to. What could it be? They want to become more connected with customers. Okay, well, that's probably a good kind of a direction to go in, but how do you measure that? So then there might be some work where you need to start to kind of support exposing, well, what does that mean? What key results would lead us to think that actually that is, that is something that we've achieved? That can be a challenge. Anyway, I'll leave that with. I suppose my aim with this talk is also to actually raise more questions than answers. Okay, I don't know if that's unhelpful, but actually, often with questions, if you have a question that is going to keep kind of going round, it'll actually generate more thought and reflection in you than a kind of a flat answer. So yeah, this is a very simple, a very similar example to Matt's. So let me go into something perhaps a little bit more interesting. This is about the kind of time-bound thing. Now, just to kind of clarify, an objective might be strategic, but it might not encapsulate the entirety of the strategy from an organizational point of view. And what I'm trying to explain with this slide is that depending on what level you might be using OKRs, is that you need to have a kind of a good cadence of how your organization or your team or even individual. I mean, you could use this from an individual. You heard about personal agility. You can use OKRs even at a personal level. So, it's a very sort of flexible approach. But with this, I'm going to show that there's more ways that people are going to be able to check in and understand whether the key results are moving in the right direction, but then also reflect on the achievement and how applicable the objectives still are. So it might be that on a kind of a high level, it's something that are set on an annual basis, check in 6 months, and that whether that's a good point from an agile point of view, that's one to kind of reflect on. It might be that something that you do it quarterly and have a kind of a interim quarterly kind of check-in as to how you're going. The reason why I say all this is that you've probably heard of SMART goals, the acronym SMART, S-M-A-R-T, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. When we talk about, well, we want to move a particular key result, from level A to level B, we want to, move our customer base from 150,000 to 200,000. It's important to understand that there's a time element to that. So great, we're using a metric and we're being very clear about the metric, but actually also there's a time element. So, and sometimes you might say, oh, well, this is our aspiration, but you don't know whether that's the next 2 months or the next 10 years. And it's important to be able to pin that down. And that's why if you're using OKRs, you need to be able to establish a cadence whereby the team kind of comes together in a regular way to understand the progress. I guess another thing with this is that, especially with kind of long horizon OKRs, you will potentially experience a change in those. Now, to sort of steal something from Matt's talk, and I loved all that stuff from NASA and the Masline. That was brilliant. Really, really kind of fantastic imagery. But what if they're going along and they have their objectives and they say, well, we've let's take one for example. If they're doing they want to make a little bit of note. They want to take some samples. But what if part of the way through they find out something new that means that they want to do something slightly different? Now, maybe within that example, they're fairly fixed in what they can and can't do. So it's like, well, to take samples, or that's it. You don't have too many other choices. In organizations, we might come across a lot of different options, because we know that no organization is static, and even more so, no environment, be it the sector, be it the economic environment, be it the geopolitical environment, you name it, it's not the same. Stuff happens. So you need to be able to have enough flexibility in your OKRs, or enough ability to ensure that they are still what you need to be going for, whilst still, on the other hand, providing enough kind of long-term consistency so people are aligned about what they're aiming for. So that's kind of like that's going to be a tension that you're going to need to hold within. And it might be that at a kind of a team level, that because the kind of the cadence of these things are typically going to be a little bit shorter, and maybe the kind of the external factors aren't going to move so fast in this in relation to the team kind of agility or ability to respond to things. So it might be that's kind of a slight less of an issue, but it still means that if you're working with a team and they've figured out their OKRs, and say they've got go back to the example of they want to get closer to their customers, and you find out some great key results by which you're going to measure that. There's no proof to say that say that takes 3 months. It might be that something changes. It might be that there's change the team. It might be that the team then moves on to is moved on to working on a different app or a different product, which means that they already are in contact with customers, or it's a back end thing. So the customer set is different, so they actually have internal customers, something like that. It's not a problem, but as a coach, these are the things that we need to be mindful of when we're supporting an organization at whatever level, to actually use these in an intelligent way rather than the kind of a purely mechanical, let's pull a lever and see what happens kind of way. So this is an example. Here we go. So this is my example of an OKR. Fantastic movie, Brad Pitt, Moneyball. It's about baseball. Now, don't worry, you don't have to know a thing about baseball. I don't really know anything about baseball. The interesting thing about this movie, so a little bit of backdrop. So the story is that Brad Pitt is the owner of the Oakland. Oh no, he's the head coach of the Oakland A's, which is a baseball team in America. Well, I don't know where else you really get baseball teams. And they're at the bottom of the league. They're struggling. They just don't have the budget to buy lots of big players, and it's a really tricky kind of situation. And he's thinking, what can we do? And he comes across this guy who's this super analyst who does all this kind of number crunching about players and using some of the kind of the theory of how to optimize your strategic approach to baseball. And he's fairly desperate, so he employs this guy played by Jonah Hill, and they figure out their objective is as follows. So what they want to do is they want to get to postseason. Now then, if you're not you could see it on the slide there, hopefully. Postseason is, so you like with football, you play all your games through the main season, and then if you get through, if you kind of end up at the sort of the top of the league, you get through to a next round, a sort of a champions playoff kind of idea. So his objective that he sets in the movie is that, we're at the bottom of the league, and a fantastic result for us, a tough result for us, as in it's going to be difficult to achieve it, is let's get to this so-called postseason, which is like this next stage tournament. And hey, forget about actually coming top of that and winning the World Series, but at least we get through, and that would be a great achievement. And that represents value. So I guess the implication of that is, okay, they get there, and it would be valuable in terms of reputation of the club, in terms of ticket sales and so forth. Now, I mentioned that Brad Pitt hires Jonah Hill as his super analyst, and the analyst he crunches his number and he comes up with this. Now, if you watch the movie, and I would recommend it's on Netflix, it's pretty good. And for actually coaches, it's a really good movie because it actually talks about a lot about data-driven decisions, which, it's always a good one to kind of reflect on. So he does all this analysis. I think they're taking a little bit of liberty there, but anyway, he says, right, okay, we need to win 99 games. We need to score 814 runs and not concede anything more than 645. Now, goodness, that's a lot of stuff. I mean, baseball, I suppose, it's like cricket on steroids, isn't it? They just have a lot of everything. In football, we're lucky if we have 2 goals, but with baseball, it's all about let's just turn the dial up. Makes it more exciting, I guess. And so if you kind of crunch that into maybe a very kind of simple OKR, this is what it could look like. We're trying to get the Oakland A's to the postseason, and we think this is what we need to do in order to be able to achieve that. Now, I'm going to come on to some of the things, and that's a picture of the trophy if you wonder what that is. So if you actually manage to win this postseason, that's the nice trophy that you get for winning the World Series. So, okay, that's it. I've kind of abstracted that. So that's certainly not in contrast to sort of Matt's perspective on this. This is very much kind of just looking at one as an individual piece that you could apply at a kind of a team level. You could apply, abstracted. Yeah, and even on a personal level, or just for a kind of small set of teams. Here's some disconnects that I want to kind of put out, because in a couple of ways. Okay, so I think that there's a couple of things that we need to be aware of. Now, none of these disconnects or these kind of challenges or anything, none of these invalidate OKRs, far from it. But it means that we have to think about them kind of quite intelligently. So, with saying that we've got this objective as a kind of a valuable place that we want to get to, and we're saying that we think that it's the key results, but we don't know that. We don't know that. It's our best guess, and that's okay. But we have to be sort of, I suppose, a little bit humble about how we classify our key results, as in, because again, we can fall back into that classic sort of deliveries. Like, oh, well, we delivered this key result, that create, bum bum bum, tick tick tick. Therefore, by implication, we have achieved our objective. Now, you probably have. You could well, but it still doesn't prove it in and of itself. It might be you could do all these things, but actually you kind of made a mistake. It might have been Jonah Hill was just incorrect in his analysis and said, actually, do you know what? Turns out you actually have to win 110 games, score 1,000 runs, and concede no more than 500. His maths might have been off. I'll leave that one with you. Next one. Again, these are all. So what we've got in this picture, we've got a bunch. So those the other guys in the scene with Brad Pitt. Those are the scouts. So these are the baseball scouts. These are guys who go around kind of finding players, and they're also responsible for putting together the team that will achieve the objective. Now, in the movie, it's portrayed that Brad and Jonah kind of work together, just 2 of them, to identify this objective, and it's just the 2 of them that say, right, well, these are the key results. They don't, and this is maybe an object lesson in how not to do it, they don't include these scouts who have traditionally had the place of doing that role of saying, okay, well, we need to pull this team together, and that will get us to the postseason. And so this is a kind of important thing, and this is, I guess, it's sort of implicit, and this is where it's maybe a little bit more spelt out within frameworks such as SAFe, where you actually need to work quite hard on collaborating, and the kind of the there's a couple of things that might happen that if you don't, on the one hand, you'll have people who are just not bought in. They're just like, I don't know why I need to do this. I don't care about this. I don't want to do this. This is not how we do this. You'll get all those kind of human responses. So that's where when if you're starting to kind of trickle down, but if you sort of, if the objectives, and I guess kind of mission, vision, but especially the objectives, are just set at the top leadership level, and they said, right, there you go, guys, off you go. You run all these risks of the classic symptoms of not getting buy-in. People are not aligned around a particular goal. They're still doing their own things. They still want to do their own things. You've got a difficult situation. Another thing, I mean, here's an object lesson. So actually, there is, at the start, you could say, well, there's some overlap. So there's between my talk and Matt's talk, because we both talked a little bit about what OKRs are. It's a reasonable thing. Why wouldn't you? But in terms of our objective, to present a useful, valuable talk to Agile Roundabout listeners, we didn't collaborate enough to be able to actually make sure that our objectives weren't clashing, or certainly our key results. As a part of that, we were going to talk about the basics. And if we'd collaborated, in retrospect, this would be a good thing. And then we could have just carefully tailored our talks, I think, to maybe dovetail. There we go. That's a learning. And a little bit kind of linked to this. When you and this is perhaps a little bit on the kind of the larger scale. For smaller ones, for kind of a team base, it might not be such an issue. But on a larger scale, you still have to figure out dependency. Even if you say you've got 2 or 3 teams, okay, and they're working together on a particular product, and you've got your OKRs, you still need to ensure that there is alignment across those, because then if you've got each of those teams doing their own thing, or certainly in kind of if they are dependent in some way on each other, you still need to kind of manage those. So the OKRs are great as a tool, but remember that you need to kind of sit them as part of as part of a bigger picture. And that's why I kind of particularly like what Matt talks about in the approach that SAFe takes, because SAFe has a lot of other structure around it, and OKRs are part of the tooling that comprises that entire framework. So yeah, I'm going to pause there. I think I've gone through quite a bit of stuff, and I think my time's up. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Rob. Much appreciated. And thought it would be good to bring Matt back in as well. And we got quite a few questions. But before, I just thought I'd open the floor up to Matt to ask if he had any questions for Rob. And conversely, appreciate you didn't get to ask if you had any questions for Matt as well. So we'll start with Matt. Do you have anything you'd like to ask Rob from his particular talk?
Rob, very informative. Thank you very much. I was just going to ask, do you have a view as to whether OKRs should be cascaded down an organization or maybe aligned down an organization? I know there are different schools of thought on that. I was just wondering what you thought.
Well, if I cascaded that sort of top-down approach, sort of, okay, and I would say, yeah, that's potentially, well, my perspective is that's potentially problematic. Because where you're looking for buy-in, where you're looking for understanding, where you're looking for co-creation, that's the kind of school of thought. So whatever process you use with it allows more of that. In my experience, it's got to be a good thing. So maybe that's a little bit more of a kind of an alignment thing.
Thank you.
So it's a good point, though.
Rob, just going back to Matt's talk, appreciate we didn't bring you back for that one. Do you have anything that you'd like to obviously ask Matt regarding his talk regarding SAFe and OKRs?
Yeah, let me look at my because I made some notes here. Yeah, well, I was interested in your perspective. So, of how you. Okay, so we have these key results, and they're going to develop an objective. Now, within SAFe, especially, is there kind of a mechanism or an approach that sort of, firstly, keeps the objective fresh and relevant, and secondly, saves against the sort of, oh well, we've got our key results, there you go, job's done, and that kind of potential disconnect between the key results automatically leading to success in the objective?
I suppose I would say that the SAFe framework is effectively trying to displace an awful lot of what you might get to do the more legacy and waterfall practices. So although it does use strategic themes and obviously the measures etc within them, but all the time it is doing one great big plan, do, check, adjust cycle. So actually, you made the point about setting strategic OKRs and tactical ones, but actually at the portfolio, there's a huge volume of portfolio metrics coming up to say, actually, are we delivering against these goals that we've set ourselves, but also actually, are these still the right goals that we should be working towards? So it does have a lot of cadence inside it. For example, I described the budgeting cycle. Actually, SAFe says, potentially you should be looking at tuning your value stream budgeting, maybe at least half yearly, if not sooner, so you can effectively you can adapt the things that you need to deliver to your changing marketplace. So it's probably a bit less static than I described it. But one of the problems of trying to describe a cyclic process is you just describe it once to the way through, and you don't really get the carry back. But no, SAFe is very keen to make sure that all the time you've got the voice from the top of the organization and from the customer and from the bottom of the organization, always all coming together in something that they actually phrase the innovation riptide, to make sure that actually we really are doing the right thing and also doing the thing right.
That's great. Yeah, no, I really like that about SAFe. That's good.
Thanks. And Matt, just a question from Michael that came in just after we switched to Rob. So he said, I've run into problems separating out business versus customer metrics. Any advice about this?
Yeah, I think SAFe takes a very customer-centric view, actually. Its perception of value is value delivered to a customer. So actually, the main metrics that exist from that direction are ultimately highly customer centric. We should be taking an awful lot of market sensing, an awful lot of market data, and using that really to derive our product direction. From a business metrics perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we do have what we call portfolio metrics. We take a range of measures because not only do we want to see how we are delivering the value, but also we want to see how we are improving our processes. But there's a fairly clean delineation between them. And I think SAFe it's not over heavy on metrics. Really, we want a good suite of customer metrics, which should be apparent, but would be really keenly focused on and scrutinized by product management, potentially some at enterprise level, but there is an awful lot of autonomy and decentralized decision making down at the product management level, so they would potentially be collecting themselves. And then from the sort of the business metric side, more on actually our internal process improvement, you probably have other bodies, potentially lean portfolio management and architecture, who would be having more of a view and auspice over those. So really there's sort of different contexts for what's trying to be achieved, and potentially inside SAFe, slightly different groups of individuals looking at them.
Thanks for that, Matt. I think this one's more aimed at Rob. So he says, okay, at SAFe level, but wondering about the team Rob is presenting to, and how does the product owner map out OKRs with the product backlog entries?
Yeah, that's kind of that's a lot of stuff in that. Let's just try and give a concise answer, really. I think. Okay, so if you're one way you can look at it is that an objective might be something that a product owner is able to support. Now, it will depend on the level, but let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that in a sort of a small system, you've got a product owner who can identify a particular objective around a product. Say they're responsible for one particular product, and they can identify that. Now, okay, so that's the sort of the aspiration of that product, and they could understand where they want to get to using their knowledge of the market and customers and so forth. So if they were able to then identify some of the key results, it may be that, and this kind of goes back to, I suppose, some of the points that I raised, that ability to access those key results needed for the objective may be trivial, might be very, very straightforward. It may be something that it's not actually currently present. And also, so that's one thing. So it may be that actually the ability to gather that data needs to go in the backlog. But equally, it might be that, and so this is when it comes back to sort of initiative. It's like, well, what is the work that you need to do in order to be able to realize the particular key result? So they probably need to be able to structure their backlog, be it on a sort of epic level or even sort of, down to a story level, where they are aligning the work that they do in the backlog towards achieving that particular key result. And there may be a prioritization there. It depends. So I guess that's kind of how I would be supporting a product owner. So I'd helping them think through what is the work in their backlog, and prove that is supporting your key results.
Cool. And final question for this evening. We'll hear from Annette, who says so it's quite a wordy one. So apologies if within the platform, is it required to change the ongoing Oracle DB data structure and data workflows, and how do you ensure the alignment and updated on both sides, if that makes sense?
It looks like that, and it's maybe taken that from quite a technical point of view. I think go ahead, Matt, please.
Yeah, as you say, I think Annette may have construed that these are a little more technical than they are. I mean, the idea with the OKR is we're trying to abstract away from technology to an extent, actually. Just as with with Scrum, when you write a user story, you write it in the customer's voice. The point about the OKRs really is we're not trying to say the what. We're just trying to say actually what we're trying to achieve. So actually, we are just trying to give a view as to these are some targets we would like to meet, and actually those targets, if we add them together, mean that we've met an objective. So it's entirely technology agnostic. In fact, in some instances you might use a whole suite of different technologies and approaches to try and move a dial, because one of the things that we do is we take a test and learn approach. If one technical approach or product approach isn't working to achieve a particular key result or move that dial on an objective, we will go and try something else. Because ultimately they become that guiding principle, that guiding light, say actually our efforts should be moving that dial, and if that dial isn't moving, let's try something else.
I was just saying, Rob, do you have anything you'd like to add on top of what Matt just said?
No, I think you say that you need to abstract it from a technical point of perspective and think clearly in terms of value. It's value. It's about it's value to the customer, and how you engage with that fully within the organization.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank you both very, very much. It's much appreciated. Obviously, giving up your Thursday evening to spend time and chat to our community. So yeah, thank you very much, Rob, and obviously thank you very much, Matt. And I can see from the comments as well from people who are watching. Really appreciated your time and obviously the effort that you've put into these talks. So yeah, on behalf of the Agile Roundabout, thank you very much, and obviously thank you very much to everybody at home for watching. We'll be back next month. We're going to be taking on a more delivery focus talk. So hopefully you can catch us next month. And from myself, and obviously from Rob and Matt, we hope you have a good evening and stay safe and hopefully see you soon. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.